the Chancellery in a carousel of crises. Inside the Chancellery, it now sounds like an old building with water damage. It's dripping everywhere. Nobody knows who turned on the tap, but everyone points at the other and pretends to be the caretaker of reason. The Chancellor is asked if his coalition will last the full legislative period, and he answers, in essence, no one can guarantee anything. This is not a trivial matter. It's the political equivalent of a captain saying, as he sets sail, "Let's see if the ship even floats." That's what leadership sounds like when it's already planning its retreat internally and still playing the statesman externally. While citizens outside sort bills, compare heating costs, and wonder how much improvisation a country can endure, inside government meetings, people are apparently gossiping, mumbling, and calculating, not in terms of reforms, but in shares of blame. The real scandal isn't even that there's conflict. Conflict is normal. The scandal is that this group turns every conflict into a play where the same punchline always appears at the end. More show, less substance, and, of course, paid for by an audience that was never asked if they even wanted to see this play. In the Union, the word vote of confidence is circulating again, not as a theoretical seminar concept, but as a tangible crisis option. When a ruling party, in its first year, repeatedly talks about the emergency exit, that's not operational noise, that's an alarm. And while they loudly talk about supposed major reforms, they practically deliver mini-reforms that are spruced up in press conferences, but crumble in everyday life like cheap plaster. It gets particularly brazen when it comes to priorities. There's no serious discussion about bureaucratic apparatuses, no discussion about pension burdens, and none about development aid budgets either. But the ordinary taxpayer is supposed to tighten their belt again and, in doing so, feel part of a courageous modernization. That's not a reform course, that's accounting with a moral veneer. And when, of all things, the free co-insurance for spouses is up for discussion in the statutory health insurance, the message is clear. Up top, they're strategizing. Down below, they're collecting. A government that rules this way shouldn't be surprised if protest no longer remains just protest, but becomes conviction. The nervousness in the Union is growing precisely because it is slowly realizing that the support for the AfD is no longer just letting off steam. People there are making decisions because they have the impression that the so-called political center is primarily preoccupied with itself. Anyone who ignores this finding has lost touch with reality. In the parliamentary groups, open murmuring has now begun. The Chancellor enters negotiations with his own position and emerges with Lars Klingbeil's position. If that's true, that's not compromise craftsmanship. It's self-gutting in slow motion. Added to this is a communication line that seems to have been accidentally taken over by interns flying blind. Before important appointments, the Chancellor is to be shielded so that he doesn't reflect the last conversation partner like a political weather vane. The Minister of the Chancellery serves as a buffer. Sometimes he is too visible, sometimes too often in the studio, sometimes fundamentally wrong. The government spokesperson is internally controversial. Domestic policy is neglected. Authorized interviews contain sentences for which anyone even halfway alert would have immediately pulled the emergency brake. Instead, these statements run unchecked through the news cycle and reinforce precisely the image they supposedly want to combat. Aimlessness at a premium fee. The whole thing has long since left the phase where one can speak of starting difficulties. We're talking about a center of power that distrusts itself, about parliamentarians who send jokes about their own boss, and about a chancellor's entourage that is frantically looking for a spin doctor because it can no longer get through the day without action. The bitter truth is not just the political spectacle. The bitter truth is that in an energy crisis, in a time of exploding uncertainty, every week counts. But instead of clarity, there's fuel discount bingo. Instead of strategy, there's hectic symbolic politics. Instead of reliability, there's fog. With the fuel discount, the pattern becomes visible as if under a magnifying glass. Huge effort, big stage, special sessions, headlines, and in the end, the relief dissipates before it reaches the citizens. This policy loves the drum roll more than the effect. It produces appointments, not solutions. It manages images, not problems. And then it wonders about declining approval ratings, as if that were a natural phenomenon and not the direct echo of its own actions. Whoever announces daily and hardly delivers loses not because of bad mood, but because of bad work. In the parliamentary group, the question is now not only how the Chancellor will emerge from the crisis, but whether he will emerge from it at all. That is the real watershed moment. As soon as the question of succession is seriously raised in the hallways, the point of no return is practically reached. Even if no one officially wants to declare it, you cannot repair this stage with a few interviews and a few new faces. When trust in the core of a government disintegrates, no slides, no messaging workshops, and no hastily invented narratives will help. Then the house isn't on the verge of burning down, it's already on fire. The situation is further exacerbated by an economic imbalance that cannot be moderated away. Energy crisis, interest burden, debt policy under appealing labels. All of this is presented like a juggling trick, where the government pretends that more debt is, in fact, frugal common sense. When consultants publicly declare that the state is actually saving money as soon as one appropriately deducts rising interest rates, that is not expertise. That is semantic acrobatics at the open heart of the budget. For citizens, it sounds like mockery because they cannot pay their bills with a fog of words. And this is precisely where the clear opposing line lies. On one side stands a political bloc of apparatuses, consultants, and career administrators who mutually confirm each other in talk shows, committees, and press texts. On the other side are those who pay the price for every mismanagement, with contributions, with taxes, with loss of purchasing power, and with growing powerlessness towards an operation that functions only according to its own logic. This constellation is not a misunderstanding. It is a system. It rewards upward adjustment and downward burden. Whoever names this is considered loud. Whoever keeps silent about it is considered statesmanlike. The narrative that one only needs to push through one more major reform sounds like a final commercial before the credits in this environment. What major reform is supposed to come from a coalition whose partners don't trust each other, whose chancellor evades simple questions about durability, and whose communication apparatus takes a swing at an own goal with every other statement? Trust cannot be decided by press release. Authority does not grow through backdrops, and stability is not created by repeating the term, while exit scenarios are already being written internally. Also striking is the overconfidence with which every criticism is treated as background noise. Whoever expresses doubts is immediately considered destructive, exaggerated, emotional. Yet, the facts have long been drastic enough. Recurring debates about a premature end to the coalition, open accusations from their own ranks, persistent helplessness regarding core projects, and in parallel, opposition pressure that is no longer fueled solely by discontent. All of this is not a capricious cycle. It is a structural failure of political governance. From a satirical perspective, the cabinet looks like a carpool without a driver's license. Everyone briefly holds the wheel. No one knows the route. And when the car swerves, they first discuss the framing of the skid. In retrospect, it's worse. It's worse because this experiment is not taking place in a parking lot, but at the expense of an entire country. To put it bluntly, we are experiencing a government that constantly talks about responsibility and in the same breath proves that it primarily delegates, postpones, or relabels responsibility. Anyone who now believes that a few personnel changes could magically restore trust underestimates the depth of the damage. The problem is not just who holds which office. The problem is the political culture behind it, conflict-averse when it comes to their own privileges, courageous only when accessing the pockets of those who cannot defend themselves with a ministerial vehicle and press staff. As long as this pattern holds, every alleged turning point remains another chapter of the same story. And that is why the crucial question is not whether the coalition technically gains a few more months. The crucial question is whether it politically still embodies a mandate that goes beyond self-preservation. If the operation only revolves around surviving the next day without an open conflict, then no project is governing anymore. Then it's merely panic management. This is exactly what people often sense before it becomes visible in polls, because everyday life is a finer sensor than any Sunday question. A quick interjection, and it's important. If you believe the state will protect you in the next crisis, then look around. The truth is, you're on your own, and if you don't have a plan, you'll be overrun. That's exactly why we developed the Crisis Preparedness System, my complete step-by-step course with which you protect your money, your freedom, and your life before it's too late. The link is in the description. And honestly, anyone who doesn't check this out by 2026 is making one of the biggest mistakes of their life. In the end, a simple conclusion remains. This alliance did not squander its credit through bad luck, but through arrogance, aimlessness, and communication that fails to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Anyone who constantly gives the impression that everything is under control, while internally the question of succession is swirling, loses not only approval but credibility at the core. And without credibility, political leadership is merely a stage set with a microphone. If you want this veil of excuses to finally tear, share this video.